Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin podcast. I'm your host Sean,
And
and
I'm Susie Q.
how's it going, Susie?
It's going pretty good.
I feel like it's been forever since we've been on here. I took a little bit of a break to go on a family vacation, but I'm happy to be back, and it was a fun adventure, and unfortunately paying a little bit of a price for that right now, but hanging in there. And I Susie was busy with tournaments as well. How'd that?
It was quite an interesting tournament actually. I went down Friday morning. It was actually kind of a close tournament. I was down in St. Chris Lake, which is southeast of Springfield, and it was high 80s. And then I did like a double dip because it was there was two tournaments. One was on Saturday, one was on Sunday, both on the same lake, which is pretty nice. And Saturday's tournament, I got 13th. And then Sunday, the weather did a complete 180. It was
as
rainy.
It often does.
I know. It was rainy, windy, and chilly. And I actually took home 5th. So,
nice.
Yeah. Turned out pretty nice, so I can't complain too much.
So, congrats, that's awesome.
Yeah, just shy. I was half inch away from getting a little bit of a payout. But
nice.
Yep.
Well, you'll get it. You'll get there. That's pretty close.
Yeah. Yep.
Did you have any heartbreakers that would have bumped you over?
Yes.
Gotta love it.
That's fishing for you.
Yep. Well, for this week's show, I was searching because I started to think about some of the other kind of techniques and tactics that you guys might want to employ here as the water and weather gets warmer. And so one of the things that should be coming into play is topwater. And so I started thinking about some of the topwater techniques and tactics that I don't necessarily have a super great grasp on. Anybody can throw a whopper plopper. I think that's pretty straightforward, although there is tricks and tips with that as well. But I wanted to think about some of the other techniques that maybe I'm not as comfortable with. And I started searching around and I started seeing a lot of articles on buzzbaits. And I was like, you know what? I don't have a lot of comfort or familiarity with throwing a buzzbait. And then I found an interesting video by our guest tonight. And he talks about both buzzbaits and topwater walking baits. So both of which I don't know that I think I've done a little bit, one episode. We'll talk a little bit later about a Jigmasters product that we did a little bit of an episode on, but I don't know that we've ever done a topwater walking bait episode. So I think there'll be a lot of good info. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Shane Beilue to the Noobs podcast. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to be on.
No problem. I appreciate you accepting the invite. And again, definitely it seems like the video had a lot of good information. So I'm looking forward to picking your brain a little bit. But before we dive into that, I wanted to give a chance to introduce yourself to the folks and let them know kind of who you are, where you're from, and then kind of how you got into fishing and even how you got into maybe doing the articles and videos for Fish and Game.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I started fishing whenever I was a kid. This is, we're recording this on Father's Day, and I had to give a shout out to my dad on Instagram because of that.
Oh, did we lose you?
One of the earliest memories I hate, and taking me on the boat with them. I know you guys are big kayakers, and I don't know if you guys are familiar, but we have back in the 70s, that kind of dates me, but there was a water wagon, which is a styrofoam platform that you basically put your legs off and kick. Well, my dad would put me on the back of that while he kicked around the lake. And so my memories go way back. In fact, my garage is right behind me. I still have his water wagon back there right now.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to Google that just to see what it is. I don't think I've ever heard
I'll send you a pic. It's a cool platform to fish off of. The kayaks are a little sweeter today, but I go way back with fishing, and bass fishing in particular has been a real passion of mine. And, as I got older, I started trying to figure out how do you catch them on your own when dad's not with you, and really got into tournament fishing back in college. And that's been, a while back. And so I graduated college in 88. So that may date me a little further. But really started, I went to Texas A&M, fished a lot of those tournaments in lakes in East Texas that were legendary, Toledo Bend and Rayburn, and all those tournaments over there just taught me a ton about pattern fishing. I became really passionate about that. When you get married, you start having kids, that kind of changes your priorities. And so I kind of shelved tournament fishing and a lot of fishing in general, but I started writing articles to scratch that itch, and write for Bassmaster, and Game and Fish has been a really good partner of mine to write for. And then I just started doing some video work for them, and talking about basic tactics, just, we call it the Crash Course series. And just talking tactics like you ran across on Topwater. I tackle all kinds of different subject matter on there, from square bill crankbaits to sonar. I mean, just basically, kind of the beginner to intermediate fisherman topics that might interest them.
Sweet. Well, that kind of sounds like our target audience as well. So hopefully that will mesh up well. But what would you say is your favorite way to catch fish? I know your article mentions kind of a little bit about that, but
yeah. Man, I don't know that I have a least favorite way, but I can't deny that the topwater's got to be the, if you can get that bite, I mean, that's the most explosive, most visual bite there is. So you got to put topwater at the very top of that list. And I don't care if it's a walking bait, a frog, or a buzzbait. I mean, I just love to watch that explosion. And I think, as I process that for the article or for the video, I think what really is the draw for topwater is the anticipation. It's whether you are surprised by the blow up or not, it's the expectation that it might be there at any time. So love that bite.
Yeah. So I was kind of curious, when you hit the water, what says to you, okay, this might be a good time to try topwater, or what kind of day or what kind of conditions are you looking at?
Yeah, so I would say in Texas where I live, we're going to fish a topwater probably late spring to late fall, and so that could be April to, or it could even be March, April, all the way into October, November. As you move gradually north, you're going to shorten that season somewhat. But I would say water temps in the mid to high 60s are going to be pretty prime for any kind of topwater. And as they start to decrease, probably the same thing. They're going to fall below that level. They just don't get as aggressive. It's not that they won't ever hit a topwater, but they just don't seem as prone to coming to the surface in that cold water environment. But as far as, I literally would have a topwater every single morning that I go to the lake in those months. You've got it on the boat and ready, because a lot of times you're going to get schooling fish right in the heat of the day that But if I were drawing up the perfect topwater day, it's going to be some type of cloud and conditions, because that's typically going to be when bass are kind of out away from cover. They're hunting, they're looking, and you're whether that's early in the morning, late in the evening, or anytime you have cloud cover come up, that's a prime time. But I will tell you, and then we can talk about this as we get into this, what I have come to learn in the last several years is that's not the only time. I used to really pigeonhole topwaters exclusively for those low light periods. They will eat a topwater in the bright sun, and I used to tell you that would never happen, but it absolutely does happen. It's just we can talk about that as we go along.
Okay, and I'm sure kind of color probably plays a part in that as well. I would think, because it's quite a different a view from the fish if you're looking up at an overcast sky versus a bluebird bright sunny sky. So I'm curious.
Some folks get really dialed in on color, and I would tell you that I've got an assortment of baits here beside me, and most of them are going to be some shade of white or some shade of black. And your bait fish colors. I mean, here's a frog, for example. I mean, just your classic bait fish kind of whitish color, but whether it's a buzzbait, I'm going to throw a white or a black. I don't know that it makes that much of a difference. If I'm getting into a walking bait, a hard bait, whether it's a popper or a walking bait, then I'm going to start to dial in a little bit more on, like you say, Sean, if it's bright skies, I'm probably going to be a little bit more translucent. I'm trying to almost hide the bait in some respects. I want them to see that movement, but I don't want them to really recognize that that's a big plastic bait up there. But on low light conditions, early and late, some of your darker colors, your frog colors, you can get into a little bit more bold type colors. I feel like But to be honest, I don't obsess on color, but I do think you can go with general tones or shades according to that bright or cloudy type condition.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, I've I had a on the Susquehanna, you know, I've played around with some topwater. You know, like I've had a lot of luck on this particular spook. You can see it's been chewed on quite a bit. And
Yep.
I have a popper that's kind of a very similar color. It has a little bit of a chartreuse belly, but and then I've also thrown like the whites, you know, and
Yes.
for some reason on the Susquehanna, I have more luck with these this color and that similar popper that I have versus anything with necessarily bright shiny chrome like
Yeah.
this is a tiny torpedo. But yeah, so I try not to get too hung up on, but I know what works for my area. So
That's the dish it out for your geography, And so you mentioned that chrome. I do throw chrome a lot in those cloudy conditions, and I've heard other people say they don't throw chrome until it's really bright and sunny out. So I mean, that probably tells you it doesn't make that much difference. And that's sort of my overall opinion on color in general. I don't mean to say that it doesn't matter at all, but whether it's a soft plastic or what have you, I don't think it's the difference in catching 10 or 0. You may refine that bite to catch a few more, or it may hurt you a little bit if you don't have the right color, whatever that is. But I don't think it's going to be complete feast or famine.
And Susie, I don't know what's your experience with poppers or walking baits and buzz baits. Do you have much luck?
So definitely do with buzzbaits. I usually stick to 2 colors, just white and black. Especially fishing my area, I'm used to fishing a lot of like different muddy water.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, I like fishing with the white most of the time, and usually that's usually all I need is the white one. Walking baits, I haven't thrown those a whole lot. Just mainly because I haven't really had like a lot of opportunity to throw them. Mainly because of where I'm at, there's a lot of moss, a lot of lily pads. There's almost not a lot of opportunity to throw them just because there's almost too much gunk in the water to get them hung up on.
Yeah.
In a sense. So
yeah. And that is exactly the issue. Whenever I was fishing a lot of East Texas lakes that have a lot of hydrilla, you can fish that foul it in the closer to the perimeter of that grass. And so yeah, you're right. You're somewhat limited by that big treble hook hanging down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I know you mentioned that in your video as well. That's kind of some of the times when you will turn to a buzzbait because it does come through the cover a little bit better. So
yeah, I fish a lot of bushes, submerged bushes out here in my part of the state. I mean, you can fish bushes anywhere, but that is a big benefit of the buzzbait because you can thread that thing between there, and I'm not too worried about where that walking bait's going to, invariably catch a limb or something. You're going to hang up. You got to go in there and get it. You blow the whole place out, so you run the spot. So that buzzbait can be a little bit more efficient a lot of times.
Gotcha. Well, I figured we could start off talking buzzbait and kind of break that down a little bit, kind of your rod choice, your line choice, and everything, and then I'm curious about trailers, that kind of thing too. So, let's start with rod and reel. What are you generally throwing on?
Yeah, on a buzzbait, I like a longer rod. I mean, I would say anything 7 to 7.4 is really good, and I like a medium heavy. That's just that'll do a lot of different things, as y'all know. But that rod right there gives you a lot of length to fire that buzzbait. And honestly, you're just looking for efficiency with your cast. You're trying to cover as much water as you can. And so if I'm fishing a bushy flat, I'm going to fire that thing all the way to the bank. And so those longer rods really help you leverage that. And then additionally, invariably your bites are going to come 70 feet away from the boat or the kayak. They're way out there. So you kind of need that added length to pull that much slack and get a good hook set. And so I like a 7 or even 8-to-1 reel on it, just to kind of just as much as anything, it's more about catching up to the fish. Eat it, they'll come at the boat. You just can't catch them if you got a slow, if you got a 6-to-1 reel or something, you can catch the fish, but you got to really crank it. So that's really my ideal setup. And I would say, from a line standpoint, do not be afraid to go like really heavy. I mean, any of the braid, fluoros, or mono will work on a buzz bait, whereas you're somewhat limited with the walking bait. You can actually throw fluorocarbon with a buzz bait because you're keeping it on the surface. Fluoro sinks, and so it's going to pull a hard bait down. But with a buzz bait, you can actually make it work. But all that being said, whatever line material that you like, go 20 pound. I mean, if you're talking fluoro or mono, and if you're going to go braid, go 30 to 50. I mean, you can go higher than that if you want to. I think that 30 to 50 casts really well. But I'm not worried about line visibility. All I'm worried about is pure strength, because I want to pull those fish out.
Gotcha. And I know just off the few buzzbaits that I do have, I have like a lot of different sizes. So this is a big one.
Yeah.
And then our friend, one of our show sponsors, I mentioned this at the beginning, is Jig Masters, and this is their micro buzz. So this is made just to throw. I think it was done in partnership with the Tackle Talk podcast. Andrew Hayes over there and Cody from Jig Masters got together and put this together. So this is a cool little buzz bait. Has a cool screw lock keeper and their swim head, and that's just made to throw like a little grub on, like a curly tail grub. So there's obviously a lot of different sizes. Do you tend to go large or small, or kind of figure out what the fish tell you?
I was probably from a weight standpoint, 3/8 to ½ ounce. I mean, you can go small, and I don't know what the weight of that one was. I kind of like the profile of that one.
Yeah, I think this one's 3/16, but I think they have a quarter as well.
The only issue with those is that they can be a little bit hard to throw because they're light. So you would want to put probably a plastic body or trailer just to kind of give a little heft there. But yeah, I from a 3/8 to ½ ounce is what I'm going to throw. And I mean, I've got just an assortment here. We put buzz toads on them and stuff. I mean, I've got some pretty good sized blade. It's one of those things where you just kind of have to feel it out. I don't know that there's a scenario where I say I'm going to throw a small blade or a large blade. I kind of want a lot of commotion, really. And so, I mean, back in the day, years ago, I remember they had twin side-by-side buzzers. They had double inline, counter rotating, all these elaborate things, and they probably work just fine. I don't know that it makes that much difference. But the fact is, I think that 3/8 to ½ ounce, but the one you've got there is pretty interesting because down times is really the trick.
Gotcha. Okay. And I know one of the wives' tales I've heard a lot about is that some people like them the squeakier the better, so they'll like let it out in the rain or like hang it off their rearview mirror so that it catches the wind and just gets spun the whole time until it just squeaks something awful, and then they're like, oh, it's perfect. Any thoughts on that, or like, do you like it to make noise, or are you more just looking for the top water to service?
I'm glad you brought that up because I've got some here in the box that don't squeak so much, and I need to break them in. So this one's a good squealer. Let's see if I can make it squeal. Yeah, you can't hear it on the podcast, but there's something about that squeal that is legit. And you have to think, well, what does a bass even think a buzzbait is, much less a squealing buzzbait? And so there's nothing in nature that really it replicates. I think the point is it doesn't really matter because a bass is a predator. They're not selective feeders like trout where they're looking for that one specific nymph or midge. They're just eating whatever's in the water. And I just think that they're drawn to that sound, and that squeal is totally legit. And so I'm not opposed to doing the same thing, tying it to the antenna on the way to the lake because you're trying to get that little grommet and that little the last part of that buzz bait. You're trying to get that right there to wear enough to where it's got that squeal. And if it's not squealing, I don't know what it is, but you're going to catch a fish on it, but it's not as effective. And so I totally buy off on tying that sucker to your antenna and going down the lake with it. You look ridiculous with it, but it will. Yeah.
Now, do you have like any preference as to like using like ones that are like clackers or like plastic props, or ones that have like the 3 blades or like 4 blades or anything like that?
Yeah, Susie, I've got a clacker here. Yeah, here's one right here. So, that clacker right there makes a lot of noise. And I think it's kind of the same thing as the squeal. It's kind of that ruckus. It just makes a lot more audible noise. It's kind of like a rattle tap coming through the water. It's just, there's something audible that those fish are keying on and listening for, and attracting their attention. So I think from a 3 or 4 or 2 blade bait or prop, you're looking at primarily speed of the bait, because I don't think it really matters. The fish, I dropped my buzz bait. The fish obviously don't know the difference in one versus the other, but those 3 and 4 blades, you can actually pull them a little bit slower. They got a little bit more drag. You can pull them a little slower.
Yes.
And as you may have seen in my video, I really believe that the slower the retrieve with the buzz bait, the better off you're going to be, because my temptation is I like to fish fast, whether it's spinnerbait or crankbait, I like to fish fast. So I'll find myself, I'm cranking that buzz bait really fast. And if you can just keep it gurgling on the surface, that seems like it gets more bites. And I don't know why that is, but it seems like just that slow retrieve where it's just staying afloat and that prop's turning and that blade squealing, that really seems to be the key retrieve. And so all that being said, is the only advantage I see of those multi-blade props is that you can slow them down even further. Yep. But I don't really even carry any, to be honest with you. I'm really about simple in my tackle selection. I don't want to be thinking about, is this a 3 or 4 blade day? I just tie it on and it's sorry. I really believe that any bait in your box is going to probably catch a fish. You just try to figure out how you can dial it in to get more, right?
Gotcha. Nice.
Absolutely. How about thoughts on trailers? Do you keep that pretty simple as well, or do you kind of let the situation dictate that?
Yeah, a lot of times, Sean, I don't even throw a trailer. A lot of times I'll just throw just a straight buzz bait. Now, the exception being, like, here's, buzz bait right there. I'm happy throwing that one without a trailer. The advantage of the trailer, it just provides drag and it keeps the bait afloat, kind of like we're talking about with the multi-blade props. You can just pull it a little bit slower, it stays on the surface a little easier. Everybody knows about the Buzz Toad combo, and that one, Strike King makes one. There's a bunch of them out there, but that's a really good trailer, and obviously no skirt on it. You can put a skirt on it, but that one works really well, and you kind of get that double action there from the trailer and the prop. We've had a lot of success with that one because I think it's sort of a profile thing as much as anything, and whether you're throwing a spinnerbait or a buzzbait, that trailer is really about the profile and giving it a little bit bigger package. And it is a big fish bait. I mean, a buzzbait of any sort catches numbers, but it also catches big ones. And I think part of it is that profile is part of the deal driving that.
Gotcha. I was curious, and I that's one thing that I have struggled a little bit with is keeping the bait on the surface. So maybe going a little bigger might help that. It sounds like maybe that will add to being able to roll that a little slower, not have to burn it the whole way back, just to keep it on the top of the water. So
and it doesn't have to be just like I throw a little Yamamoto Swing Cinco on the back of it. That's just enough to kind of give it a little bit of drag. There's just the split tail trailers work good. Just something that water.
Sorry, we had a little lag there. I was just waiting for it to catch up. All right. I think you're good now. All right. Cool. Okay. Well, the only other question I was going to have is there a time when you won't throw it? Because I know sometimes when it's crystal, like glass top, and I'm looking around and I don't see anything disturbing the surface of the water. I'm always thinking, like, why would I throw a buzzbait here? Because nothing else looks like that. Is that something that you would do? Or is that maybe that's the time? Maybe something disturbing it will be something different enough that the bass would be like, oh, hey, look at that, and go hammer.
Yeah. Now, this is kind of an interesting subject matter, because I would have told you, like I was kind of referencing earlier, 10 years ago, I'd have said, there's no way in the world I would ever throw a buzzbait in the middle of the day slick water, but I've absolutely seen it work. And it's kind of one of those things, you got to prove it to me, and it actually does work. I'm going to tell you that's more of a one-off type thing. It's not something that I would say, oh, it's slick calm and it's 100 degrees, I'm going to start firing a buzzbait. It's kind of a niche thing. I think you're basically trying to time it where if you know that there are fish moving in to feed on bluegill and shallow pockets and stuff like that at a certain time of day, they'll eat that buzzbait. And I think that's kind of what I've been noticing or seeing in the last few years is, and honestly, my dad kind of got me onto this. My dad was, throws a buzzbait in the heat of the day like that. I'm like, that'll never work. Well, it does work, And so but it's kind of a niche deal. So ideally, I think, I like just a little bit of breeze, a little bit of you're trying to break up that surface a little bit. And it's kind of like we were saying earlier, and you were alluding to, you don't want to give them a really good look at that bait, So this little niche deal I'm talking about, where those fish are moving up to eat bluegill, and that's to eat. And when that buzzbait comes across, they're eating it. And so that's kind of a one-off. 9 times out of 10, I'd tell you want those lower light, breezy conditions. Not necessarily wind with the buzzbait, because the wind it doesn't run good in a high chop. But if you've got a little surface breeze going, that's ideal.
Gotcha. And how far would you say a bass is going to come up? Like, what water depths would you throw it over? Like, how far up from, like, they're 15 foot of water, they're probably not going to come up off the bottom necessarily
No, that's my thought. I like them on main lake banks, points and pockets in the main lake. There seems like there's always certain banks that just kind of hold bass early or late or whatever it may be. But I think you're kind of looking at I don't know. I was trying to think from a depth range. I would say anything 5 feet or less is probably fair game to pull a fish up to. Out whenever you're fishing these grass lakes, which is, those are kind of niche deals as well. You're looking at, you may be out in 15 feet of water, but the hydrilla is kind of cascading down. So you're in deeper water, but those fish are not deep. They're not on the bottom. They're suspended. But yeah, that buzzbait will pull them up. I'd say 5 feet or less for sure. But if you're in 2 to 3, even better.
Gotcha. And is that one of those type of baits where you will like come up close to the shore and just cast parallel to the shore and just run it down the bank? Okay.
Yeah. If you're walking the bank, a buzzbait's an awesome bait for you. But yeah, absolutely paralleling, going down the shoreline, throwing it in front of you from a kayak or boat standpoint is an excellent technique. Really, my goal is if I can thread it through, bring it by as many cover types as I can on one cast, and that's the most efficient type of cast. And then I can just keep moving, and I want to run it into the boat dock. I want to run it into the bush. I want to run it up, off the rock or whatever it is. I want to throw it on the sand, and I'm going to start cranking the sand, because I want to figure out they're hitting it right off the bat. They're hitting it in 18 inches, or they're only, they're moving it, it's several yards off the bank. You're just trying to figure out where's that sweet spot that you're targeting. Gotcha. And most of the time, even in low light conditions, you're going to catch them around bushes or whatever cover type that you have. They're still going to be around that bush. They may not be locked in where you got to flip in there to get them like you will say midday. But once you got them out and they're kind of patterned up, you can figure out that, okay, if I run it by, the bush, that's when they're coming out to eat it. And on that video that you've seen there, Sean, I was catching fish on that buzzbait on a shad spawn. It was mid-morning, and those fish were just hammering. It was like, the skies were perfect for that. So it was absolute heaven for catching buzzbaits catching fish on buzzbaits that day. So that's
one of the things that you talked about too in that video. It was grass flats, and that made me really, because there's parts of the Susquehanna where it's just like we have a mile wide river, and 90% of that is just one big 5-foot grass flat. And I'm like, if I'm looking for something to just cover water and see what's in that grass flat, that sounds like the perfect combination.
It is. And they hear that coming out of that grass. And that's one thing about hydrilla or any type of vegetation. It's like, where do you cast? I mean, there's nothing specific out there. Where do you cast? And so that buzzbait's awesome, because you can just fire cast over the top of it and just cover water and keep moving. And I learned that early on fishing that vegetation. Don't feel like you got to sit there and soak one area. You just keep moving, and those fish will tell you where they are, but don't slow down. And that buzzbait's a great bait to just keep chunking, man. And that, the beauty of the buzzbait, you don't have to have 20 years fishing experience. You can be out there 20 minutes and you can catch them on a buzzbait. You're pretty much throwing it out and reeling it back in. There's nothing advanced about it, but it's just a cover water, big fish type of bait. I mean, it's, like I say, I will have one tied on every single morning that I go to the lake because it's just that kind of a lure.
Gotcha. Well, I'm gonna have to have one tied on now, at least while it's warm here in Pennsylvania. So
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
something to give it a try. Okay. All right. Well, anything else you think the folks would need to know about buzzbaits so that you can think of? Anything I missed? I mean, I don't know. That's Susie. Anything else you could think of?
I think y'all dialed it in, man.
Okay. Well, if,
Yeah.
if so, then we can move on to the other thing I wanted to talk about, which was walking baits. Now, I do have a little better experience with walking baits. Kind of one of the first baits I ever was given was a spook, and I definitely didn't know how to fish it at first, but as soon as someone taught me the walk the dog trick, then the spook started paying off for me. And it's weird because it doesn't necessarily look like a whole lot, but something about that technique, walking the dog, and the way a spook just, I don't know, it was almost one of the first topwater successful baits that I got to use. So
Yeah, I've been throwing it for many, many years. And back in the day, the spook was about the only modeled out there. Now there's all kinds of imitators and they all catch them. I mean, they're all really good. But man, there's something about that spook. And I said this about the buzzbait. It is, I mean, topwater in general is probably a big fish type bait, but I probably caught more, 4+ pound fish on a spook than any other topwater, because that walk the dog, that side to side slashing motion, man, it is powerful. And I mean, it works on a frog and it works on a spook. But yeah, I love throwing a spook and or whatever you want to call that, walking bait, cigar bait, what have you. It is a phenomenal bait. And yeah, let's jump into that one because that's.
Gotcha. Well, I know, like we mentioned, the spook is kind of the one that has been around forever. Although I think the torpedo has been around for quite a while too. This one has a little prop on the back, so I think that differentiates that a little bit. But now the newer ones, like this is a shower blows. I don't know if you're familiar with that, evergreen shower blows.
Oh yes, that's a good looking bait. Yeah.
Yep. I've had good luck with that one. And the spooks come from all different sizes. Like this is a Zara. This is a puppy. So that's a tiny little one. And then I haven't even opened this one yet. I got it at a giveaway at a tournament. Like they're like, oh, it's the last thing left on the table, but I won. So I'm like, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So I haven't even broken out of the package yet because it's so ginormous. But
they'll eat it. They will eat it. Yes. Yeah. I mean, so I think I think we're talking size on the buzzbaits, but I do think the spook, the size of the walking bait can be a factor, because sometimes that seems like they like that smaller profile. That's the one they seem to bite better. Sometimes that bigger one. And I'm like you, Sean. I've got a great big one that's probably, I don't know, it's huge, size of my computer screen, and you've got to have saltwater equipment to throw it. But those fish are sometimes keying on that size of profile. And again, there's not a situation where I'd say, well, here's when you throw this one or this one. You just kind of go by feel and you experiment. And if your buddy's got a small one, you got a big one, you just kind of see who's catching them. But yeah, I think that profile can be a factor in getting more bites.
Gotcha. And the walk the dog technique is something that's key to using these baits, right? And so let's talk a little bit about how you pull that off. I know that took me quite a bit to learn about how much slack you're actually pulling and giving back versus, that's definitely not a kind of something you want on tight line necessarily.
Well, that's right. Yeah. And the whole trick, as you just alluded to there, it's not to tight line. Every pull that down, if you retrieve it to allow that rod tip to recoil between twitches. And so basically you're just throwing 5-6 inches of slack back in the line between twitches. So you're going to twitch down and recoil the rod tip back, and that's going to give that bait slack to walk. And it just takes a little bit of muscle memory to figure that out. But once you get your cadence, I mean, you're doing it second nature, and you're basically reeling and twitching at the same. You're not working the bait by reeling it, but you're taking your slack in, as you guys know. And so it's just one of those things. You get the cadence, and man, what's interesting though is sometimes they like that real wide glide. They just big wide retrieve. Sometimes they like that little fast twitch action, and it seems I think I may have referenced this in the video, but I think that wider glide has often been the case for me. You kind of get in a cadence, and it's just something moving across the surface. And I don't really pause mine a lot. A lot of people will really slow the bait down and pause it. Not that there's nothing at all wrong with that, but I just feel like, those fish are up shallow and they're probably fairly aggressive. And so I usually just work it fairly fast. I'm not trying to, scoot it real quick across the surface, but I don't spend a lot of time pausing the bait. But some people do, and it works really well for them. So.
Gotcha. And that's one of the things that I've heard is an advantage. Whereas with a buzzbait, you're kind of covering a lot of area. Whereas with the walking bait, you're keeping it in the strike zone. If, say, I know there's fish in that type of area, whether it's, that 5-foot section along the bank. And that way, as you're walking that bait back and forth, it is getting a lot of movement, but it's also not leaving that strike zone very fast.
Yes.
So it's a bait that allows you to kind of stay in there and really kind of get that bass, like, all right, that thing's really annoying me. It's up there walking around. I'm going to go up and smash it. So.
Yeah, that's 100% in my opinion as well. You can cover water with it, obviously, but it's also really good for targets. And I like throwing it, like you said, okay, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a fish around this obstacle, this bush, rock pile, whatever, and I can work that spook, as slow as I want to. Whereas that buzzbait, it's coming over at a pretty good cadence, But yeah, I think that's really the strength to me of the walking bait, is that you can vary the cadence. And I like to work it up beside a piece of cover, and then I kind of work it fast as though it's something trying to get away. Like, uh-oh, I've been caught. And then that can sometimes catch them too, as they're, as that bait's trying to get away, just that predator instinct that something's get away from me, and so they'll go up and eat it.
Gotcha. And I know from the video that your rod and reel choice is a little bit different than your buzzbait. Well, actually, quite a bit different.
Yeah. I like a shorter rod, and whether you're fishing from a boat, a kayak, or even the bank, if you've got a big long rod, you're just going to hit the bottom or hit the boat or hit the water. And so I think personally, I like a 6'9", 6.5 to 6'10", something like that. Something that I'm a fairly tall guy, 6'3", so I just like a rod that's a little bit shorter, and I can just twitch it a little better. It's just easier, a little bit more responsive. And I like a medium to medium heavy on that one as well. So if you're throwing the big heavy spooks, that's probably going to be a little bit light of a rod. But and then on the reel, I'd be the same, 7 or 8 to 1 retrieve. But this is a situation where I really like straight monofilament, or I'll do. You can go straight braid. The downside of straight braid is that there is no memory, and if you pause the bait, it'll glide over the line because it's so soft. So if I'm going to go braid, I'm going to put probably a 18-inch. You've got enough resistance in that mono to keep the bait on straight braid, but fluorocarbon is no go. It will not work on a walking bait, or popper for that matter. It just doesn't work.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that has been my experience as well. I tried straight braid, and the same thing. It would walk over itself and then just kept foul up on the trebles, and then it's.
Yeah.
So definitely having some kind of mono leader is definitely, I think, the way to go there if you're not throwing straight mono. So yeah,
but again, go heavy. I mean, I like 20. I mean, you can buy a roll of big game for $6, get 600 yards out of it. And man, I just get the big heavy mono, and I spool it up 20, 30 pounds. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just, you're not worried about visibility, but that thicker line actually floats better on the water. And so you can get a little bit more response. And so I'm not at all worried about, line visibility on a top water. So the heavier, the better, why not?
Gotcha. Okay. And I know, that technique was something we talked a little bit about, where some kayak anglers aren't as comfortable standing. Mm-hmm. So, walking the dog, that is a little bit harder to do. I've learned to kind of, if I'm sitting, I can kind of do it off to my side, just kind of at an angle, kind of getting that motion. But my kayak's, stable enough that I can stand. So a lot of times I will do the same if possible. But I know for those folks out there who don't like to stand, it is possible to pull off the walk the dog from a seated position. It's just a little more, learning to get that right. But that's the one nice thing about the spook. Just the shape of it lends itself so easily to that. That's why I think, it worked out so well for me because it doesn't take a lot to get it to walk the dog. You know, a lot of people kind of, I've talked to a couple other beginning anglers and like, I just don't think I can make it do that. And I'm like, it really, you just have to try it. It kind of does it on its own. If you're even doing it halfway right, you know, it's gonna kind of do it. And the more you do it, the better, you know, like you said, you'll get that muscle memory and before you know it, you'll have it, you know, walking the whole way back to the kayak. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just, once you kind of find that rhythm and cadence, it becomes sort of second nature. You're not even thinking about it, but I would think you're right. I don't fish off a kayak much, but I do think if you could hold that rod tip to the side, you can pretty much accomplish the same thing. It's just a little different action, but should accomplish the same thing.
Gotcha. Yep. And trying to think of anything else that I can think of. Obviously, you know, we talked color selection a little bit on these. I have all sorts of different colors of these. And like I said, I haven't really, like this one was the one I got in our, all sorts of different colors. Even like the bright fire tiger ones, you know, and this one has a dress treble on the back. So they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. But again, I don't know that, you know, necessarily it makes a huge difference, but if you can match the hatch, I think that, you know, might be, if you see bait fish and you have something that's somewhat similar to that size or color, I think that'd probably be not a horrible choice. So
totally, man. Absolutely. And I'm with you. If there's something specific that you're seeing like bluegill, man, why wouldn't you put on some kind of bluegill pattern, you know? But some guys that I know they get really dialed in, like on, you know, frog patterns and things like that. And again, I just don't think it's the total difference in feast and famine on a walking bait. I like white and black, like we talked about, and I do have an assortment of frog colors, and some of the cool colors you pulled out there probably would be more along the lines of when it's water's a little off. Clean water whenever I'm throwing a walking bait, whereas a buzzbait. But I like that cleaner water, and so I think color comes into play. But I couldn't tell you exactly, you know, 100% that matters every time. You know.
Gotcha. That makes sense. You know, and it's weird. Most of my lakes around me are mostly off color. It's, you know, definitely not clear. Now the river, the Susquehanna, occasionally does run clear. There's times where it also runs chocolate milk as well. But so it is good to have, you know, somewhat of a mix of colors if you're going to be fishing the river. But yeah, cool. Susie, any other questions you could think of about walking baits? Oh, I know one I was going to ask. I've heard one of the things that helps walk more is by tying like a loop knot or something. Do you tie direct, or do you use a snap, or do you use anything at the end, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say I put if it doesn't have a split ring on it, I do a split ring. If you're tying direct, I would do the loop knot. But you do want a little bit of slack in there just because you want to have a little freedom of motion. You know, you don't want to be, it's just harder to walk if you tie it directly to the eye. So if you got a snap or a split ring or that loop knot, yeah, definitely that gives it some freedom of motion for sure.
Gotcha. Okay. I'd heard of that a couple of times. I don't know how to tie the loop knot, so I usually just put a snap on there.
Yeah.
It's easier for me, but that's just me being lazy and not wanting to learn another knot. So
understood. Yeah.
Excuse me. Well, cool. Susie, I think we kind of covered a lot of this. So
I think we did. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think we've got all our bases covered. That's awesome.
Well, good. Shane, then we won't have to draw this out any further than we need to, man. Wanted to give you a chance to kind of let folks know where they can find you. I'll definitely include, like I said, a link to that video and a link to Game and Fish as well. But any other place you want to shout out, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, Instagram's always a fun place. It's bass_scribe, just like the writer. And so I do a lot of freelance writing and video work. Really been doing a lot for Game and Fish with this Crash Course series. But yeah, check out the Crash Course series on Game and Fish. We do a lot of topics, lure related and so forth. But I've got a YouTube channel, and I think it's the same thing. I'm trying to remember what my what my username is. I think
I'll
it's
find it.
Yeah,
I'll find it and
Bass
include it in the show
underscore
notes.
Scrabble. Thank you.
Gotcha.
No, much appreciated, man. I love talking fishing. So anytime you guys need want to talk, man, I'm your guy. I love to kick around fishing topics all the time.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, again, thanks so much for coming on. Guys, check out the show notes. I'll include links to a bunch of the baits that we talked about in this episode, and as well as links to Shane's writings and his videos. And so be sure and check him out as well. Shane, if you wouldn't mind hanging on a little bit after we end this, I want to have a few other things just to go over real quick.
Yeah.
But otherwise, guys, Susie, anything else?
Not that I can think of.
Awesome. Well, again, guys, thanks for tuning in. This has been another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin podcast, where we bring you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. You guys have a good night.